And so this session will also be recorded, and this session will also be part of the different panels that we've been able to do. So on behalf of Manuela, I want to thank the three writers who agreed to be here today for this chat. Very informal. So we have Elaine Avila, we have Esmeralda Cabral, and we have Maria João Maciel Jorge. Thanks to all three of them. And I said we will do this bilingual, or we'll do this whatever language the writer wants to talk in. But I would like to start by asking all three of them. We'll start with Elaine, the order I introduced. So Elaine, Esmeralda, and Maria João, and then we'll switch orders. To take about 5 to 6 minutes or longer if you need to tell us a little bit about yourself, to tell us a little bit about your Portuguese connection, your Azorian connection as well in the Portuguese culture, your connection to the Portuguese-speaking world in general, and a little bit how writing came to you. So we'll start with Elaine, who has, as all of you know, several published books, including the wonderful book Fado, which is a wonderful piece of theater that should be, it is already widely known, but should be even better known, especially in the Portuguese communities in all of North America. Elaine, thanks for joining us.
Muito obrigada. Muito obrigada por este convite. Thank you, everyone, for this invitation. It's such an honor. I've been following what you've been doing in the last several days, and I see that there's been singing and beautiful dresses, and it's such an honor to be a part of this congresso. So okay, so I hope I have all the questions, Denise. So what is my connection to the Azorian diaspora? My grandparents immigrated from Ribeiras Pico in the 20s and 30s to San Diego, California. And so I'm their descendant. And I grew up outside of the community, assimilated in San Jose, California. And it's only in the last 10 years that I've been learning Portuguese and writing more about my heritage. I would say that my grandparents planted seeds in me when I was young that have only come to fruition now. So can everyone hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, okay. And as far as writing, I believe I almost always wanted to be a writer. When I was young, I didn't know how much work it was. I thought that I could escape into the world of books, and that I've always wanted to be a writer for as long as I can remember.
Thank you, Elaine. And Esmeralda, the same question to you. And as a preface, Esmeralda has a forthcoming book, which I've already pre-ordered, and you should do the same, How to Clean a Fish. So it's a wonderful title. It's a beautiful title. And it's a book that I think everyone will enjoy. It talks about her connections and her travels in Portugal. And she'll tell us about that book as well and read from it. But Esmeralda, the same question, your connection to the Portuguese world, and of course, how how writing has become part of your life.
Okay, thank you, Denise, and hi, everyone. My connection is, I was born in São Miguel, so Micalense gosta aqui tudo. And my family immigrated to Edmonton, Alberta in the late 60s. So I came when I was quite young. And yeah, I was actually, so even though I'm not technically the immigrant generation, I wasn't an adult, I wasn't working or anything like that, but I was brought up pretty Portuguese. The community in Edmonton at the time was quite small, so we did a lot of things together, and I danced folklore, and I went to Portuguese school twice a week after school, and then Saturday mornings for as long as I can remember. So, I mean, I have strong connections there, and I'm actually still in touch with my teacher from that time, Dona Amália Alves in Edmonton. She's very dear to me. So it's, yeah, it's a strong connection. And in terms of my writing, so my training is in agriculture and in environmental studies. So I worked in that for a couple of decades. But my dream, like Elaine, my dream was always to become a writer. So I think in midlife or shortly after that, I decided, well, why not? The time is now. So I did a program here in Vancouver at the Writer Studio in Simon Fraser University, and that kind of got the ball rolling for me. And so I've been writing for about 10 or 12 years. And yes, like Denise said, my first book is coming out next week. So if I'm a little giddy, you'll know why. That's why I'm very happy. So that's me.
Indeed, indeed, and we're looking forward to it as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about the book itself. And then we'll go to Maria João, who is actually there in person. And the same question, Maria João, and you can we can do it all in English, or we can do it in Portuguese, up to whichever one you feel that you would like to use. Maria João, the same questions. Your, of course, connection to the Portuguese American world, or in this case, the Portuguese Canadian world. I always have that part being here in California, but the Portuguese world, and also your memories of wanting to be and how the writing came to you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's nice to see you, Denise, and nice to see again Elaine, and nice to meet Esmeralda, that we only know each other by email so far. So I came to Canada in 1989, and I was 18, and I did not want to be Portuguese. I wanted to be Canadian. And I wanted to be a free, liberated woman and experience everything that I could not do because I had been brought up in a very conservative Catholic environment, and I'm none of those things today. I never wanted to be a writer. In fact, I never wanted to be anything. I remember wanting to be a flight attendant, only to realize that they were just air waitresses. And then I didn't want to be that. Then I wanted to be a singer, but then I realized I couldn't sing. So then I became an academic by accident, because I enjoyed learning, expanding my horizons. And I had people who encouraged me, some of them in this room, and who said, what are you gonna do next? And I would say, I have no clue. And then I had a wonderful, I had many mentors. And I remember when I was doing my master's, somebody said to me, what are you gonna do with this? And I said, I have no clue. And she said, why don't you do your PhD? And I said, hey, what the heck, why not? And then I broke her heart by going to U of T, because she wanted me to go to Madison, Wisconsin, and do my PhD in Madison, Wisconsin. And I only applied to U of T against her wishes. And I got in, but if I wouldn't have gotten in, I would have moved on. Maybe I would have revisited the flight attendant thing. I don't know. It was through my academic work that I started to realize that in my rush to be somebody else, I didn't take into account that everyone else was already taken. So I couldn't be somebody else unless somebody died and gave me their identity. So I had to reconnect. And I become Portuguese in my own terms. So I pick and choose what I like about it, and I reject what I don't like about it. But same thing with Canadian identity. And it started to dawn on me that there were, my connection as a writer is a connection to the island. That is the universe where I always find myself. And I think I find myself there because there have been persistent, I would call them microaggressions in the Portuguese community, and persistent lack of understanding what it's like to be from the Azores. So I wanted to dispel some of those myths as well. And I think I write to educate others, but also to not ignore a past that I was in a hurry to get away from. It's basically an opportunity for me to make certain things that in my youthful haste, I didn't think were important. I hope I answered them.
You did beautifully. And I was just going to suggest to you that maybe one day you could incorporate all of that in the classroom. In other words, you could have a singing and waiting on students classroom session. with
I
literature.
do. In fact, I tell my students that when I was 21, I was a welder, and they don't believe me until I show photos and I show the scars that I still have on my feet from welding. So yeah.
The singing and their line stewards professors. So anyway, but thank you, Maria João. And that takes, and that, I'm sure you have those notes because that's going to make a good short story one of these days, Maria João. Let's go back to to everyone. And as we had discussed, it's a very loose conversation, nothing very formal, but I think the most important part, and that is one of the wonderful things I like about Canada and the United States, is that writers actually read their work. And when I go to Portugal, I say to people all the time, when we have a book presentation where the writer actually reads his or her work. And so I've asked all three of the writers to read part of their work, and that's what we want to, of course, listen to. And so this time we'll start with, we'll do the same, Elaine, Esmeralda, and Maria João. And so if you can take a part of your work and read it for us, maybe give us a little bit of a context, behind what you're going to read. And that's what we would love to hear from each and every one of you.
Hi, so I have a new book coming out. It's called The Ballad of Ginger Goodwin and Other Plays. And one of the plays is called Kitimat, and it's about Azorean immigrants in Kitimat. Kitimat became the center of an international controversy because in 2015, they were the only municipality in Canada or the US to vote on whether or not they wanted a big oil pipeline to come. So in my story, I have some grandparents that are in their 20s, and I have some city planners and a chorus. So I try to tell the story of Kitimat, which was founded in the 50s, and the only people that would take most of the jobs, it was 50% Portuguese and Azorean, were people that had great strength to endure the smelter. So that's why the Portuguese took these jobs. So this is an excerpt from my new book. This is from Act 1, Scene 2. This is Kitimat 1952, and the chorus members as actors perform an advertisement from the 50s. It will be a test of human intelligence and strength to build the largest aluminum smelter in the world. This will be bigger than finishing the railway. It will open up Canada, make profits and generate electricity for generations, save the masses from the slums of Europe. We'll blow up a mountain, scoop it into a dam, make ourselves a lake, make a river flow backwards, secure the rights to land, sea, and river, build a whale of a hydroelectric plant, 16 times the height of Niagara Falls. We'll need workers. We'll make a great place to live. We'll get the best town planners in the world from New York. Make tomorrow's city today, unique in all of North America. Build everything in 2.5 years. We'll call it Kitimat, City of the Future. And this is Act 1, Scene 4, the de Terra's living room, 1958. José and Clara enter, and we hear 1950s music scratching on a phonograph. Amalia Rodrigues, Lawrence Welk, Dean Martin, Dinah Washington. José and Clara enter. José sets down Clara's suitcase and turns to her. José, close your eyes. Clara closes her eyes. José leads her in. Open. She surveys her new home. Oh, José. José, you like? Clara, I love it. It is for us only? José, yes. Clara, oh, José, it is very grand. It comes with furniture? José, yes, from the company. Yes, the smelter. Clara, did you ever think we would have such a house? José, never in all my life. When that man catcher, that's what they call the guy who came to talk to us in Montreal in the work camp. The man catcher. Clara, man catcher? José, when he came, he said we could have a house, a family. Imagine. I had no home. Everything was work camp to work camp, sending money back to my parents in the Açores. And here he comes saying we could have a family, a future. And he told the truth, the dream. Here it is. running water right in the house. You just turn and nice beds, and electricity, light with just a close and open of this on the wall, and machines to keep food cold. In English, they call it refrigerator. Clara, a what? A rater? A rater. Refrigerator. Clara tries to say refrigerator, but can't and begins laughing. Jose, I went to the company dock with all the others, and there were hundreds of them for all of us, hundreds. Flat out, one for everybody. Jose, and places for us to take the English classes in the nights, all provided. Clara, I can learn. Jose, the dream, and here you are, here we are. Clara, married. Jose, even though we've never met. Clara, it was the wish, the need of my parents. It's a long way. Jose, I understand. I agree. Clara, when did you take your vows? Jose, all we have for a church in Kitimat is a little shack we call Joey, but it is where we go. Clara, the Joey shack? Jose, like Portuguese Joe, Portuguese John, Portuguese Jose. All the English guys think our first name is Portuguese. Clara, the Portuguese Joey shack? Jose, yes, it is our church. So I stepped into the Joey shack on Sunday, May 23rd, 1958. 10 in the morning, Kitimat time, and you stepped into the church at the same time as me, Clara, 5 in the afternoon in the Açores. It is strange, I know, my father's idea. Jose, I never imagined I'd be alone at the altar. All I had was this little photograph of you. Clara, all I had was this little photograph of you. Jose, why are you sad? Tell me. Oh, Jose, my sisters, my friends. Jose, do you miss them? Don't be afraid. Here's a free country. You can speak without fear. Clara, they cannot get permission from Salazar to leave like us. It is very hard there now. My little brother, he spoke badly about him. One word against Salazar one time, and they locked him up. Who knows, for forever. And they take all the young men of our village for the wars in Angola. And when they come back, they're Jose, I know, they are not themselves. Clara, I try not to think of sad things, happy things tonight. You know, if we can speak freely, we are in a kind of heaven. Oh my, I mean, on our wedding day, with the money you sent, we made a delicious cake and I rented a beautiful dress. The chorus members enter as villagers from the Azores. They play music and dance the chamarita. Clara, all the village came. The church was filled. We had a huge party with food and music and dancing. My sisters, my friends were all there, and I gave them a piece of wedding cake so they could put it under their bed and dream of someone to marry them to. The chorus dances off. Jose, may I kiss you? Clara nods nervously. They kiss their first kiss. It is awkward. He takes her suitcase to the bedroom, not sure what to do. She follows him. She lies down on the bed with all her clothes on, extremely nervous. He sighs, lays down on the bed with all his clothes on. They stare into space, worried that their marriage won't work and unsure what to do. Thanks.
Magnificent. Thank you. Wow, so many themes there in just that short excerpt. So many things that are important to the Portuguese Canadian experience, the Portuguese Canadian, the Portuguese diaspora experience, independently where one lives, and so many different struggles that folks had to go with, and so congratulations, Elaine. It's a wonderful, as we already knew it was going to be, because we just expect big things from you. But that's a wonderful piece. I think Maria João, as an academic, could agree that we could actually do a master's thesis on that one excerpt there, and all the different connections and the different nuances and everything that it touches within the Portuguese experience. Let's put it in North America, because it is in Kitimat, but it could be in many other places in both of Canada and the United States. So and a wonderful piece to read for the 70th anniversary of the mass migration to Canada. Thank you so much, Elaine. And the wonderful word of the wonderful refrigerator, how you say it, just before Esmeralda comes on. We have that one, we have, as you do in Canada as well, as all of us have, these words that we adapted because we didn't know these things existed. And the Portuguese in California, as you know, because you were raised here, Elaine, have a wonderful saying there's two ways to say it, refrigeira, and the other one, which I love even better, because it comes off of a Portuguese word, which is frigideira. And we know what a frigideira is in Portuguese, but frigideira. And that one has actually a story that I'd like to share before Esmeralda reads, which is the number one brand in the United States, and I would say probably in Canada as well, in the 1950s and 1960s was Frigidaire. And if you recall, the refrigerators of the 1960s had the big name, now the name is, casually mentioned there, General Electric or whatever, Westinghouse, but it had a big name. It was like really huge. You could see it across the room, Frigidaire. And so that's what people called it from that name. It had nothing to do, of course, with the frying pan. But with that, again, thank you so much, Elaine. We'll go to Esmeralda Cabral, and hopefully it'll be an excerpt from the new book, I'm sure, right?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Wonderful.
Yes, but I just have to say that I remember calling it a frigidaire.
Frigidaire, that's right.
Yes, thank you. So because this is a conference about immigrant women and Mother's Day is coming up, I thought I would read an excerpt from my book that's about my mom. And interestingly, it also touches on something that Maria João said, because I too went through a phase where I did not want to be Portuguese, and at about the same age, so that's interesting. So this is from a chapter called Reflections on Duality. Soon after returning to Edmonton, I lucked into an outdoor summer job which took me away from home once again. This time, I would be the leader of a junior forest ranger camp for young women 16 to 18 years old who were considering a career in forestry. Our camp was situated along the Sheep River in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in southern Alberta. We cleared trails, felled trees, built fences, repaired footbridges, and counted bighorn sheep for a scientific study. I was there for about 6 weeks, and given that I had been traveling before that, it had been a while since I'd spent much time with my family. I invited my parents to come and visit me, and much to my surprise, my mother said yes. She didn't even ask many questions. My father said, "Oh, maybe next time." I drove into Calgary to buy supplies for our camp, then picked up my mother at the Greyhound bus station in my work truck. She laughed out loud when she tried getting into the passenger seat and needed me to give her a lift and a push from behind. We headed south and west through Black Diamond, Turner Valley, past the Sandy McNabb Recreation Area, and onto a gravel road. "Where in the world are you taking me?" I sensed that my mother was nervous, but also excited about this adventure that she was embarking on. A weekend in the real outdoors, with her daughter as a guide, no less. My mother met all the young women over dinner, sitting at a long picnic table. They loved her. How could they not? She was outgoing and charming, and she had an infectious laugh. She told stories in her broken English that sometimes were hard to decipher, but she did it with such enthusiasm that we were captivated. She told jokes that she translated from Portuguese, which made no sense in English. She asked numerous questions and showed interest in everyone and everything in these surroundings that were so foreign to her. Later that night, we were sitting around the campfire, and my mother turned to me and said, "However did you turn out this way? You seem so sure of yourself out here. We never even took you camping." My mother slept in the cook's trailer, sharing a room with Janice, our camp cook. She was thrilled that there was a bathroom in the trailer, and she wouldn't have to make her way to the outhouse during the night. I slept in my fireline tent on a bed of boughs, cushioned with a thin air mattress. Shortly after midnight, I woke up to go to the outhouse and saw that the light was still on in the trailer. My mother and Janice probably chatting like two schoolgirls on a sleepover. My mother was an artist, among many other things, though she did not consider herself one. She painted magnificently, though, and that weekend she gave me a tour of the mountain camp I was living in through a painter's eyes. I love all the hues of green, she told me. I don't think I've ever seen so many. And that sky is so blue. She looked around her with awe. The mountains are very close, so big and jagged. I wish I'd brought my paints. I introduced her to the outdoor experience and fed nature to her on a platter. Look over there, Mom, I said when she came with me in the morning to check for supplies at the trailhead. There's the biggest ram in the area. His name is 56. It's very special to see him. Isn't he beautiful? I pointed out a waterfall, then a mountain goat trail. My mother looked enchanted, and she wished out loud several times that my father had come too. More than a decade later, she still referred to that weekend as one of the best trips she'd ever taken. When I found my first permanent job, a government job, it was back in Edmonton. I was 26 years old. I moved home again and returned to a life of curfews, lots of questions, and parental hypervigilance. During those years, I remember being more concerned with fitting into Canadian culture than I was with maintaining ties to my Portuguese heritage. I lived with my parents, but I balked at their strict conservative rules. I found freedom in nature, and my identity was closely tied to the outdoors. I went hiking and paddling as often as my job would allow, with short trips to the mountains at least 2 weekends out of every 4. In my mind, I was Canadian, and I didn't have much desire to return to Portugal, not even for a visit. My parents, however, always talked about going back. They went for long visits, and when they'd return, they'd start planning their next trip. My parents were often away in May in order to attend the Festa de Senhor Santo Cristo, an annual religious festival honoring the patron saint of the island. I would call my mother twice on consecutive weekends to wish her happy Mother's Day, because Mother's Day in Portugal is 1 week before it is here. During those conversations, she'd sound nostalgic, saying she wished she could be with us in Canada, and she'd complain about the cobblestone streets on the island and how her heels would get stuck in between the stones. I don't get it, Mom. When you're here, you always want to be there. And when you're there, you want to be here, I remember saying to her several times. And then I'd follow that with, why don't you just decide on one or the other? I don't remember how she'd respond to that. And I shudder now to think about how impatient I was with her when she expressed her feelings of longing. Things were so clear to me then. I lived in the present, and I believed all the saudade was a waste of energy. When my husband Eric and I went to Portugal on our honeymoon, he fell in love with my other country. We spent 2 weeks in Lisbon and the Algarve, and then 2 weeks in São Miguel. I had no idea it was so beautiful here, he said, marveling at the green rolling hills and the dark lava rock on my home island. We would walk along the Avenida in the evenings and then have dinner at a seaside restaurant. I don't know how your parents could have ever left this place, he said, on more than one occasion. I'll leave it there.
Wonderful as well. And again, with lots of different nuances there to be unpacked as well. Beautifully descriptive writing, Esmeralda. I mean, I'm not going into camping soon, but you make it sound like I really want to do it. And really, and I love the phrase, I found freedom in nature. And I think that people do look, at different avenues that one can escape in order to find what one needs. And a wonderful phrase, saudade, the waste of energy. And sometimes in the collective sense, it's something that sociologists have been looking into as well. So again, congratulations and thank you, Esmeralda. And Maria João, que eu agora nunca mais vou esquecer, que é Maciel Jorge. Aliás, I have some very good friends, Maciel. So.
Exatamente, mas no programa eu sou 2 pessoas. Eu sou Maria João Dona e Maria João Maciel Jorge.
Eu acho que tu és várias, mas portanto vamos então. Maria João will also read from her work. So
então,
thank
pontos,
you.
Manuel. Obrigada, Denise. Portanto, eu vou ler estou a completar um livro switched to Portuguese. I don't know why, but I'm finishing a book of essays that is inspired by the themes from my little book of short stories, and the Vida, which was published in 2016. And you are my guinea pigs. I'm going to read something to you today that I hope it's a little funny and a little insightful and a little inspiring. And these really are meant to be conversation starters. This is called Thieves, Dictators, and Bakeries. I arrive early at the bakery just to scoop out the place before my companion gets there. It's near lunchtime, and this isn't my first rodeo. I am well too aware of the chaos that it's about to descend in the form of crews of famished men who will rush through these doors and demolish the hot table. It's an ethnic version of Looney Tunes, where a compacted cloud of men spins into the bakery, leaving in their path empty plates, garbage, and maybe some olive pits or bones, should those items be anywhere on the hot table that day. Sure enough, and just before I have a chance to collect my thoughts and walk in, it's too late. The wily coyotes and the roadrunners are here, and I best step aside if I want to live another day. When my companion arrives, we rush in, hoping for the best while fully prepared to push and shove a little, Portuguese style. Don't worry, when we do it gently and with a smile. This strategy helps minimize any cultural awkwardness with non-Portuguese patrons, who are usually much more invested in an often imaginary line than any of us. I say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Keeping up with the Looney Tunes metaphor, the lunchtime bustle is unreal. Each table more boisterous than the other, Port English here and there, laughter, loud kids, clinking of dishes, cutlery and cups, the constant sizzling of coffee machines, you name it. All it's missing is a box of dynamite and an anvil to fall on one unfortunate wily coyote. Oh, and have I mentioned there's usually a TV mounted somewhere? It too competes in that symphony of commotion, making the ability to chat with anyone nearly impossible. So we must shout. Perhaps those that think that Portuguese are loud have all been at the bakery at lunchtime. If so, I can hardly offer a counter-argument. And if an anvil did fall, I'm not sure any of us would notice. All ends well when we realize that famished men go for the stewed beans, leaving the beautiful tray of baked cod almost intact, like a mirage in the desert. Now our smiles are genuine, and we realize how hungry we actually are. We pounce at once, whooshing through, so we can get a table in the mad rush. We feel slightly bad for the poor creatures who obey lines, but our hunger speaks louder. One table is available. It is near an old man going through a pile of newspapers. This is a rather common sight in a Portuguese bakery, a hangout place for the elderly who busy themselves reading several Portuguese newspapers, reading old friends, or even sitting alone, hurling the occasional insults at the TV. Such is the case with a fellow near us. Ladrões, that's who you are. Thieves. These are typical sentences in his repertoire of invectives that he throws at the TV, accompanied by brief looks of disgust. Whereas my friend's eyes grow larger, I pretend to ignore it all. It seems that everyone else does as I do, leading me to suspect that this is not the first time, nor the last time that he speaks to the TV. My friend and I switch to English, and we engage into a deeper conversation of a life that has led him there, to that table. Of course, these are things we've heard before. We are not shocked by any of it. Then he says, no tempo de Salazar havia dinheiro nos cofres. Back in the day where letters were the only form of communication, immigrants often enhanced them with a few bills. But then they speak of letters that arrived empty due to the thieving mafia in the postal services that included everyone, even the poor letter carrier, once a well-regarded neighbor and friend. I heard once that an entire shipment of high-quality olive oil destined for the diaspora was stolen by Portuguese custom agents. Apparently, no one works in Portugal. The suggestion that the good immigrated, leaving behind only a bunch of lazy, sticky-fingered nobodies is not lost on me. These are stories we have perpetuated, maybe to combat immigrant prejudice back home, or maybe as a way to justify our very own discontentment as immigrants. Here we are the good, we work hard, we've made money, and we don't resort to dishonest tricks. It's all worth it. It's part of the lies we tell ourselves. The old man yells again. Durante o tempo de Salazar, tínhamos dinheiro nos cofres. Ladrões! My girlfriend's blood pressure goes through the roof. Yet we fully understand the crux of the problem and how ingrained the longing for the dictator still is. Ah, that old saudade. Never too far to those who live in the past. The old man is not unique. He was the model to emulate for the illiterate mass, a churchly figure who exuded modesty, who spoke of acceptance of one's lot in life, who upheld imperialism, colonialism, patriarchy, who ruled through a culture of fear, silence, and ignorance. After all, the entire nation has not figured out its relationship with Salazar. He was elected in 2007, the greatest Portuguese of all time in an opinion poll conducted. I recall many years ago receiving a poster at the university of the most influential Portuguese of all times. Salazar was front and center. I remember ripping it to shreds while repeating the silliest little lie. If I don't see it, it doesn't exist. That little lie smacked me right across the face when I spotted such poster in an allegedly democratic institution. Both of us, my girlfriend and I, women in our 50s, seated at that table, we hold old and renewed resentments towards our nation of birth. We don't want to be too harsh on the old man, but we do wonder if he has daughters, if he has granddaughters. A sadness overcomes us. We both feel it in our shared sensibilities. May have to wait for the fall to read the rest. Thank you.
Muito bem. Excellent, Maria João. Again, many different things. And as you said, funny, insightful, hitting some hard punches at times. Questioning, as all good writing does. This symphony of commotions, as you put it, that is so often in the Portuguese world outside of Portugal, in Portugal itself, but outside of Portugal. I just recently, when I went to Portugal, I sent a picture to my wife because I thought it was great. I was in Boston, and the agents at the gate said, we are going to start boarding the plane in about 3 minutes. We'd like all of those in first class to please, move forward so we can start boarding. all 222 people, got up. So I told my wife, I sent her a picture of it and I said, this is great. I'm going to be the only one in coach. I have all coach to myself. There's 220 people going in first class on SATA. And so that's part of that symphony of commotion that, we only understand, it seems like. So going back around, I'd like to ask you, and I think we still have about 15 minutes if my time serves me right. So I would like to, in all three of your writings, in different aspects, of course, different styles, but, the Portuguese part of being in Canada, being a Canadian, but being still talking about your heritage, what your heritage is something that you came with, as Maria João came at the age of 18, or something that you came with, but more from your parents, as Esmeralda, came very, very young from. So it was basically Canadian from all aspects, but raised in a Portuguese home. Or Elaine, who was her grandparents. So we're talking about third generation in this case in North America. So how important are those connections that you have, and also how important do you feel to tell these stories? Because I'm reminded of a recent novel here in the States, American Dirt, by an author who's widely known, but very, very criticized, because some of the things that she was talking about were not there, because she didn't have that cultural experience of the people, crossing over from Mexico to the United States. And so how important has these stories and these occurrences and these things that have been part of your life, are they to your writing? We'll start with Elaine. And how important, and how do you see this in a country such as Canada? And we want to focus, of course, on Canada, that prides itself in being a multi-ethnic country. Multi-ethnicity in the United States is something brand new. It's something of the last 30 years or 40, maybe. Up to then, it was the melting pot. Canada has never taken that policy, at least officially. So how important is that cultural aspect of being Portuguese? So that's one question. Second question, how important is it to you to express it, of course? And do you think that there's room for it in mainstream readership in Canada, which of course Elaine has proven that there has been, but in many ways. But I'd like you to talk about those three different questions, if you don't mind.
So thank you, Denise. So being Portuguese is very important to my writing, and I'm really very grateful to the people of Kitimat, because I went and I worked at the Portuguese hall when the Portuguese kids were playing, and I was cooking with all the women in the hall so that I could find out stories. And then the men found out there was a writer, so they all came and told the stories. And I was able to, talk to some of the first immigrants to Kitimat. And I think it's really important to look at, because the history of Portuguese immigration to Canada, which is different than the United States, creates a lot of solidarity for us with other immigrant groups. I was pretty shocked to discover it was only the 50s that Portuguese were allowed into Canada, and that to also read the representations of the Portuguese in American literature by Ronaldo Silva, and learn about all of the prejudice against Portuguese in both American and Canadian literature. And that's why I think it's so important to tell our stories, is to connect to others, but also to address that prejudice. I think that my grandparents had a lot of, they were in a strong community of Azorians in San Diego, but my aunt and my father, I feel, had a lot of pressure to assimilate, to become American, and to kind of disappear. So disappear our Portugueseness and make it disappear. And so for me, writing has become a way for all of that to reappear. And I love that Maria João was talking about finding herself at home in the islands. And I found her. She appeared to me on the streets of Madalena and Pico. So it has this amazing quality of people appearing, including ourselves. The reason that I went back for the first time is I have a cousin who collected all of us, and he acted like it was a huge tragedy that I had never seen the Azores. And I was like, well, that seems like a huge overreaction to me until I went. And then I was like, yeah, this is a huge tragedy to not know where you're from. And so in many ways in North America, across North America, there's been a prejudice and a pressure for us to not know our roots. So I think I've answered your questions about.
You did
Yeah,
perfectly,
okay.
with lots of different words that I've took note, and including one, there's solidarity with other ethnic groups, and I think that's a very important part of all three of you, what you're doing with your writing, because it is indeed with all the other ethnicities. I mean, I'm not, of Italian, but I've read some great Italian stories in Canada that have connected me to that community in many ways. So, Esmeralda, the same kind of question. Of course, your Soldad is different, but and your wonderful writing in this category, which I like, which is creative nonfiction. That is really an upcoming category in many different ways. And so tell us a little bit about that situation as well, and the importance of telling our stories because we have these experiences.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. So when I came, you're right, I was quite young. I was 7 years old, but I was raised very Portuguese. Like, we spoke only Portuguese in the house. And I think that helped me keep my Portuguese language, but to a detriment to my parents, because they never actually mastered the English language. So I was official translator in the house from a very young age. So it's not that I try to write about Portuguese, I just do. And because I write memoir, I write about me, and I feel I've always felt like a Portuguese. Even the way I talk with my hands, like, it just seems to infuse everything that I do. So I don't really try to write the Portuguese story. I just write my story, and of course that comes out. But I think when I'm in Canada, I feel very Portuguese, and I think all my friends see me as being Portuguese, my neighbors. But interestingly, when I go back home and go to the islands, I feel kind of Canadian, so and that's what I write about a fair bit, is that feeling of displacement in both cultures, but also a feeling of home in both cultures. So it's, it just comes out.
It does. And that period that you went through, that Maria João also alluded to, that period that you went through, Esmeralda, of not wanting to be Portuguese. I mean, I'm in your teenage years, want to be Canadian. Now that you sit back and write about, memoirs and write about these memories, did that period influence you as well? Because sometimes you have to distance yourself a little bit to look at things. Sometimes when we're very much into the community and we've never taken a step back, it gives us a different perspective when you've taken. So do you feel that process that you went through, a few years ago, or when you were a teenager, did that take into consideration what you write today?
Yeah, quite a few years ago.
Well, I was going to say about 10, 12.
Right. I actually hadn't really thought about it until Maria João said that at 18, because that was definitely when I went through that as well. I think it was just this deep desire to be, a part of something, and to eschew the sort of Portuguese traditional values, which of course, now that I'm older and a mom, and, I like all those traditional values. And, I just reading this piece about my mom just made me wish I could talk to her and say, oh, how I thought that, you're so strange for thinking these things and saying these things. Well, guess what? I'm there now. So, in so many ways, I've become my mom. So yeah, I think you do need, or I've needed the distance to come to appreciate it. Yeah.
Indeed. Maria João, your thoughts on the role, and as an academic as well, as a writer, but as an academic. And we've talked about this not too long ago in the when you were in Filamentos, and the role of, ethnic literature telling the story that sometimes other folks cannot. And do you feel when you write these stories, and when you write, such as the insightful piece that you gave us, funny, insightful, with a few digs, as good writing does, as I said, do you feel that this is also an important way to continue the connection and to tell the future generations, of these things that somehow, and we know, will be forgotten if they're not told in stories?
Well, I think that the place where I feel more comfortable is in the in-between, is when I am Portuguese in Canadian contexts, and I am Canadian in Portuguese contexts. And I love it, because if somebody says to me, hey, do you want to go to a bullfight? I go, no, thank you. I'm going to go over there and have French toast. So being Canadian is that flexibility, that freedom. Ida and I were talking about this earlier, the third space, the in-between, the third way, as Ian Chambers has also said. So I don't think that our stories are no less and no more important than anyone else's, but they are stories worth telling. And I try to write from a place that, although focus on the microcosm of the Azores, it really is about the human condition. It is stories about victimization, alienation, exile, despair. These are all things that anyone from whatever ethnicity or whatever ethnic background they are can relate to. And I long for the day when we don't actually talk about mainstream and ethnic literature, because there's no such thing. There's either all mainstream or that everyone else is, or that everyone is ethnic. So it's important that we fight against that too, and that we don't reproduce sometimes stereotypes that keep us in a past that is certainly not part of the possibilities of the in-between. There's an essay on that too, where I make fun of Canadian loaves of white bread that have these ridiculous expiration dates, and I long for Portuguese fresh bread, and I think, who invented this bread? It looked like little armies of white snow, whiter than snow loaves that smell like nothing. So it's the ability to choose. But for instance, we need to have more transcultural conversations. It's Portuguese. We are aware of the other, but we don't talk to each other. We don't promote enough interdialogue. And I think that's missing as well.
Some very good points. I've been asked to end on time, and I will. We have a minute and a half, so I'm going to end on time. Thank you, Maria João. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Esmeralda. Indeed, the great idea there at the end, Maria João, which is we should explore this idea of doing more inter-ethnic readings and inter-ethnic conversations with other ethnicities that compose our multicultural societies, and look at the similarities and the differences, and instead of just maybe talking just to each other. That's a very good point, and I promise to explore that, and I promise you also that I'm going to get you involved, Maria, as well, and your university. So let's another project. So again, thank you, Elaine. Congratulations on all your work. Thank you, Esmeralda. We look forward to the book. I hope to get mine. It's set next week, so I've ordered mine, so hopefully it'll be here soon. Thank you, Maria, as well. We look forward to also your continued writing. By the way, if you want to read a great book from the Azores in English, and you do not read Portuguese, I recommend, as I always do, and it's actually part of my of the reading my students have to do in our culture class, which is Dark Stones from Dias de Melo, and it has, the new edition has a wonderful, wonderful preface by Maria João. Congratulations on that piece, Maria João. So thank you all for being part of this panel. Thank you for your writing. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for being who you are, whether you're in between one way or another, whichever world. And indeed, it's all part of, you know, who we are. As I end, I was just in San Miguel, and I went to buy something, and I wanted a piece. I wanted to buy cheese, okay, and so I wanted the guy to keep it for a couple of days because I want to bring it back to the hotel, and then I said, you know, I'll pick it up from you on Monday morning. And he said to me, he said, "O senhor volta à terceira na segunda-feira." And I was the biggest compliment anybody could give me, because he thought I was still from Terceira, and I've been in the United States for 55 years almost. But I guess my Terceira accent came through, and he thought that I was actually picking up the cheese to bring to Terceira. So we are who we are, and all of these different experiences that we have make your writing awesome, great, and needed by Portuguese Americans and Portuguese Canadians and other diasporas that want to know about our experience. Once again, thank you all. Thanks to Manuela, thanks to the committee for inviting us, thanks to all of you who are following us in different parts of the world. Em português, muito rapidamente, a Manuela pediu para eu acabar, portanto aqui com agradecimento, obviamente, primeiro em meu nome pessoal, à Manuela e a todos quantos nos acompanham. Foram 3 dias muito, muito interessantes. Infelizmente, o primeiro dia não pudemos gravar, portanto, mas o segundo dia e hoje as comunicações estão gravadas e, como eu disse, portanto, em inglês, as apresentações do dia de ontem já estão, portanto, no canal YouTube da Universidade Estadual da Califórnia em Fresno, Fresno State PBBI. E obviamente poderei fornecer essa informação à Manuela para ela depois, mais tarde, fornecer a todos e a todas. Muito obrigado mais uma vez a todos que fizeram, portanto, deste congresso um evento importante para a comunidade portuguesa, não só no Canadá, mas a comunidade de língua portuguesa e de expressão portuguesa em várias partes do mundo. Um congresso riquíssimo, com participações do Canadá, dos Estados Unidos, do Brasil, de Portugal, das várias regiões de Portugal e, portanto, de várias partes da diáspora. Tudo isso faz com que, de facto, a lusofonia esteja viva em várias partes do mundo. Muito obrigado a todos, um forte abraço desde onde, independentemente de onde estejamos. Um forte abraço para todos. Muito obrigado, parabéns Manuela, parabéns a todos e todas.
Obrigada, boa tarde.
Boa tarde, obrigado.